Hello, you're watching RPTV News, and my name is Dimitri Martinovic. On today's episode, we will be speaking with MPP Suze Morrison, who is the provincial representative for the riding of Toronto Centre. We'll be speaking with Suze Morrison on the recent announcement by the Ontario National Democratic Party to have Ottawa eliminate a loophole that allows the payday loan industry to charge ultra-high interest rates. In Regent Park, where we have one of the most diverse neighborhoods in Toronto, and where many people have been struggling during the pandemic, this kind of change could be a welcome sign of relief to many people in the area. Let's join Suze Morrison now as she explains what the bill is all about. Hello, Suze Morrison, and welcome to RPTV News. Once again, we're very pleased to have you with us. I was remembering that since the beginning of your political career, we have interviewed you quite a few times over these last few years. And I'm wondering if you could spend a little bit of time and tell us what these last few years have been like as a MPP, and maybe also speak about your role as the Ontario NDP's critic on both for housing and women's issues.
Yeah, well, I had the housing and women's issues portfolios previously, but just a few weeks ago, we actually had a critic shuffle. So now I have urban Indigenous issues, as well as missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls as my portfolios of focus. Yeah, so it's been a recent shift, and my colleague in University Rosedale is taking over the housing and tenants' rights piece. So really great to see her taking up that work. But it's been a wild couple of years. Certainly the housing and tenancy piece is still a top priority in the riding. And I've tabled a number of bills related to that. We tabled a bill called the St. Jamestown Act, which is currently at first reading, which was in response to the big fire at 650 Parliament Street up in St. Jamestown, as a way to better hold landlords of high-rise apartment buildings accountable for keeping their buildings safe, to try and prevent future fires. We've also worked on some pieces around trying to improve rent control rules, and most recently with a focus on COVID, fighting for residential eviction bans, and rent subsidies for tenants. But unfortunately, the Conservative government has voted down all of those things. So it's been a bit of a frustrating time knowing that, we're fighting as hard as we can for, the changes that we need to see in our community that are going to support people through this really difficult time, and just not getting the response that we need from the government members.
Right. So as you know, Regent Park is an area of the city that has an extremely diverse mix of residents and people who are low income and have been struggling during the pandemic. The recent private member's bill by the NDP to eliminate a loophole that allows the payday loan lending industry to charge ultra-high interest rates could be a welcome sign of relief for that community. Can you explain to our audience how the payday loan companies operate in the contemporary setting? And can you explain in more detail what the NDP proposal entails?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've known for a long time that payday lending is becoming increasingly predatory, particularly on low-income communities. I remember as a kid, my mom would often rely on these payday loans to get us through short-term financial crunches. But what ends up happening is the interest rates are so high that you end up in a cycle. So, you borrow against next week's paycheck. And then when next week's paycheck comes in, you have to pay that loan back with, astronomical fees. And then, that paycheck goes even less farther than the one before. And before you know it, you're in this endless cycle of payday loans that you just can't get out of. And it's incredibly heartbreaking. And it's the most vulnerable folks in our community that are, being targeted by these predatory practices. So my colleague, Sandy Shaw, who's the MPP for Ancaster West Dundas, which is out towards Hamilton Way, she tabled a private member's bill that would cap interest rates on payday loans at 40%. We know that currently some people can pay upwards of 300 to 400% on these loans. It's very predatory, and it would also establish a borrower's bill of rights, and would also establish a payday loan task force, which would help advise the government on how to actually ultimately phase out this industry. In addition to addressing the payday loan piece head on, there's this kind of bigger picture issue here with that, the levels of poverty in our community shouldn't be so broad and so deep that anyone in our community needs to resort to high interest predatory loans just to pay their rent and put food on the table. The fact that poverty has gone unchecked in our communities for decades and has gotten to the level that it is, I think is a bigger issue that needs, broader systemic solutions like affordable housing and increases to minimum wage, better protections for workers, better protections for tenants, more investments in public and social services. These are the kind of bigger picture issues that we need to grapple with as communities and as governments. But I think that, in the immediate term, really cracking down on the predatory practices in these payday loan companies is a really important step that we need to take.
So the other part is that the federal government at the moment isn't doing very much. For instance, on their website, they have an extensive coverage of all of the ins and outs of risking lending money from a payday loan company, and then they simply just take their hands off it. And in fact, I'd like to quote a recent item from the Toronto Star on March 11th, where Anna Arnson from the Department of Finance simply reiterated the government's position that citizens should be aware of the risks and that the government has provided sufficient information on the matter. If people know what they're getting into, why blame the payday loan companies is sort of the government's position.
And I would argue that people have no other choice. They may know and understand the risks, but if you have no other choice, if your kids are hungry and you need to buy groceries and the cupboard is bare, or, if you're $200 short on your rent and that your landlord is going to immediately file an eviction notice and put your family at risk of losing their home in a pandemic, right? You can understand the risks and still not have any other choice. I grew up in poverty here in downtown Toronto and daughter of a single mom. And my mom used these payday lenders. And, when you're experiencing poverty, you are just navigating from one crisis situation to the next. And there's no time to stop and think, what are the long-term consequences of solving this immediate pressure here? How is, solving this immediate crisis, maybe ineffectively and with risk through a payday loan? That's tomorrow's problem. That's the problem of the next crisis. I can't feed my kids tonight and have to put food on the table. So I'm going to do what I have to do, as a single mom with kids, as my mom was. And, families that are experiencing that level of poverty have no other choice. Being aware of the risks doesn't, mitigate, doesn't create an alternative option. I mean, at the end of the day, we have families that have been left behind by federal and provincial governments for decades. The poverty in our community hasn't gotten any better since I was a kid. In my family, I'm the first really to, successfully graduate university and enter into the workforce and be the first in my family to break a cycle of generational poverty. And through luck, I would say, more than anything. And there are kids in our community here in Regent Park that are not going to have luck on their side, and who are facing massive systemic barriers to overcoming the poverty that they are growing up in, and through no fault of their own, but because they have been abandoned by consecutive liberal and conservative governments at the federal and provincial levels who have not invested in housing, who have not invested in education, who have not invested in economic opportunities for these young people, training opportunities for these young people, who have allowed our community in Toronto Centre to be the child poverty capital of the country with some of the highest food bank use in the province. That's the reality that we're facing here. And, what are we getting? More tax cuts for the most well off. And a complete abandonment of addressing the issues that people in poverty are facing, like predatory payday lenders that are charging interest rates of upwards of 400% on short-term loans. It's absolutely outrageous.
So if everyone knows that these companies are taking advantage of low-income people, why do you think they are allowed to continue and flourish in today's society?
Simply, I would say because it's profitable, and because there hasn't been a government at the helm that has been willing to crack down on them. The only thing that we're missing here is political will. And the NDP, we have the political will and we have the legislation tabled and ready to go. All we need is the Liberals and the Conservatives to come to the table and work with us to get it passed. I really don't think that Doug Ford is the type of premier that's going to support this bill. I mean, we'll see when it comes up and works its way through the legislative process. But at the end of the day, this is a profitable industry, and Doug Ford has shown himself over and over again that he supports big business and big money interests over helping people. It's as simple as that.
It's very hard to understand that the two can coexist. Everyone knows that these companies are taking advantage of low-income people, and no one seems to be wanting to do anything about it. Now, as you know, one of the areas of concerns and reasons why people turn to payday loans is that the conventional banks have made it difficult for low-income people to access and maintain traditional forms of banking. For example, if you bounce a check for $100, the bank charges you $45 for having insufficient funds.
Yeah, I mean, I think what you're talking about is the NSF fees, right? So when you've bounced a check or you've bounced a payment out of your account, you get hit with, I like to call it the $45 poor tax. It's the tax that you pay for being poor. Sometimes it's as simple as, you forgot the timing of when your paycheck went in and when you had a bill coming out and they overlapped by a few hours on payday. Now you've been hit with this NSF fee. When you go into a store with your debit card, if something has gone wrong, you've forgotten a bill that's come out, you've miscalculated in your head how much money you have in your account, it just declines. It doesn't cost you anything when your card declines at a shop. Why is it any different when you have an online transaction that's declined or a payment that's declined? It should just be declined, and then you sort it out and you reschedule the payment. To set, people in poverty back $45 for every single transaction. And it's not just $45, because depending on the situation you're in, you could be paying fees on the service provider side as well. So, if you're a renter and you bounce your rent check, chances are your landlord is going to come back and try to hit you with a fee for the NSF on their end, right? And so you as a tenant could be out upwards of almost $100 because you mistimed when your rent check came out versus, you forgot that, you had your grocery, you accidentally spent maybe $50 more at the grocery store this week. And, you meant to cash that, that GST check that came in the mail. You thought it was going to clear in time and it just didn't. Really honest mistakes that when you're in poverty and you're trying to just scrape by and you get hit with these poor taxes everywhere you go. And it's just so unfair. I really honestly don't believe that NSF fees should exist in our banking system. Our banks are making more than enough money, through all of their other products and services and investing and lending and all of the things they do, our Canadian banks aren't, financially cash strapped. They don't need to be wringing people in poverty for every penny that they've got every time that they bounce a check.
So is this something that the NDP would like to try and budge the banks on? Is this part, how would you do that? Because it's sort of the whole picture. It's not only that government support profitable businesses, but also the banks keep everyone in check. So the poor people are sort of hit twice or hit from every direction. What can be done about the banks?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a federal, I think it would fall within federal jurisdiction. So as a provincial representative, I don't know that any legislation I could table would adequately fix the issue. But I certainly hope there's appetite for my federal New Democrat colleagues to look into this. And I certainly think it's something, within our values as New Democrats. So I certainly will actively encourage my colleagues federally to look into this a little bit more. But as a provincial representative, we don't legislate the financial industry in the same way that the federal level does. But I'm happy to pass that on to my federal colleagues.
So I wonder if you could just go over once again what the initiative is that you're trying to present to the government, just sort of.
On the payday loan piece, yeah. So like I said, it's a private members bill tabled by MPP Sandy Shaw. She's an NDP MPP in Hamilton West Ancaster Dundas. And it would cap interest fees for payday loans at 40%. It would create a borrower's bill of rights so that, consumers are aware of their rights and protections, and would also create a task force to advise the government on actually how to replace payday lending with, more effective, products and services through, other sectors that would ultimately be working towards the goal of replacing the payday loan industry as a whole.
Thank you, Sue. And finally, I'm just wondering if there's anything else that you would like to say about the issue of reducing the high interest rates charged by the payday loan companies.
Other than to say, it's a really tough time out there. And I hope everyone's hanging in. I'm fighting for the supports and resources that I know the community needs right now to get through this difficult time. And I'm going to keep doing that. But my office is always here to help. If folks run into any problems, give us a call, send us an email. Where we have our office right at Dundas and Parliament, but we're all working from home remotely right now, as everyone else is. But we're still available. Call us during office hours, send us an email. We're happy to help if you run into any problems.
Okay, thank you very much. And we will certainly be speaking with you again. And thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Please do not forget to like, comment, and share to our channel. Follow us on all our social media platforms. And for more information, please check out our website.